Well, there's also no appreciation of what the word war actually means, because for the last 21 years, we have faced opponents without armies, without air forces, without air defenses, essentially without any capability per se at all that you would associate with a modern state. Now we're facing one of the greatest military powers in the world. Now, this military power today in Russia is not what it was 30 years ago any more than we are.
Right.
Its forces are too small to launch an offensive against Western Europe. But the Russians know what they're doing. And if we push them and we threaten them and we bully them, we will regret it. They are not leaving Ukraine. It's a vital national strategic interest for Russia that Ukraine not be hostile to Russia. We have no vital strategic interest in Ukraine. Our only interest is to end this thing on the best terms that we can get. That's where we should focus. But instead, we're treating Ukraine as though it were Texas. It's not.
Yeah, and we sort of moved to where we began, and that is, as you said, neutrality is a necessary first condition for Putin to have constructive talks that lead somewhere. But what is neutrality when it comes to Ukraine? What does that look like, and what is given up and what is gained?
Well, I think the best example, something the Russians embraced and respected and have honored ever since, is neutrality in Austria. In 1955, the Austrian president wanted to end the Soviet occupation of Austria. They were sick, frankly, of the Soviet military presence, wanted it gone. And he sat down and he put together the Austrian State Treaty. Dwight Eisenhower, who was then president, welcomed the development, because Eisenhower had said repeatedly when he was Supreme Commander of Europe for NATO as a five-star general, and then later on as president, we didn't have then the armed forces, the ground forces, the air forces to defend all of Europe. He was interested in neutralizing as many states as possible to simplify the task of simply defending Central East Europe, that is West Germany, from an attack.
Right.
So he welcomed it. And that treaty worked very well because Austria retained the capacity for its own army, its own government. It simply excluded all foreign forces, all foreign entities of any kind from maintaining any position of military power or influence in Austria. And it said it would maintain good relations with Russia, trade with Russia, in those days, the Soviet Union. It worked. And I think the same thing could work for Ukraine. And if you go to Austria today, it's enormously prosperous and successful.
And once at the heart of what was then the Eastern Bloc in Europe, and we've come a long ways without this kind of conflict. We've approached it a number of times, but this is the first time that it is broken open into open warfare. And I'm not sure that we have the talent in our diplomatic services or the wherewithal in our military to assure a favorable outcome. And that's deeply disturbing. I think most Americans would take neutral, as you say, and be thrilled at the result. But obviously, that is not what this administration wants. It's not what 40 U.S. senators want. And that, to me, is deeply frightening because none of those senators, not one, has the capacity to be, in my opinion, negotiating treaties and conclusions to conflicts that result in neutrality and peace.
You're right.
You get the final word here, Colonel.
Well, you're right. The strident positions that we've taken are simply irrelevant to the strategic requirement, which is to end the war. And I think we're going to watch the Europeans, for the first time in many decades, step forward and organize a peace out of this tragedy. And we will be marginalized as a result. And anyone who thinks that this has helped unify NATO has lost their minds. In fact, the opposite is the case. And we've already seen that with Germany that has said, thank you very much. We will continue to buy all the oil and gas that Russia wants to sell us. Japan has said the same thing. Those are two of the biggest economies in the world. So the notion that somehow or another we are forming some great coalition to crush Russia is absurd. It's not happening and it won't work.
Colonel, if I may, I'd like to turn to one last question that we'll insert before your last words. And because I neglected to address this, which is the Iranians taking credit and responsibility for the missiles they fired into Erbil, Iraq, the Kurdish capital of Iraq, and nearly hit the U.S. consulate there. And now we hear Xi Jinping threatening again Taiwan, 13 aircraft flying into the defense zone again from China. Where is China? Where is Iran as this war goes on?
As far as China is concerned, they're reacting to another one of our freedom of navigation exercises in the Strait of Taiwan. We keep moving aircraft carrier battle groups through there. And the Chinese have never stopped a commercial ship. And commerce has been our preeminent concern as a global navy for several hundred years. So there is no threat to commerce from China whatsoever. So I think we're precipitating trouble with China at this point that only reaffirms the wisdom in China's mind of staying the course with Russia. So if our objective is to persuade the Chinese that they should remain strongly partnered with Russia, then we're certainly succeeding. As far as Iran is concerned, if they had wanted to hit our consulate, they would have done it. And the real question is, what are we doing with 2,500 troops on the ground in Iraq? I haven't figured it out. The place is effectively an Iranian satellite. If we leave, it will become more problematic for the Iranians, not less. And then secondly, the principal competitors in the region are the Turks and the Iranians. The only thing we've done is to keep them apart. And the real question in my mind is, why are we bothering?